Okay, we need to talk about the latest patch in Monster Hunter Wilds. This is the biggest patch we've ever had aside from the obvious title updates, and surprise surprise, the community is on the fence with it. There's a lot to unpack with the new difficulty system and RNG Talismans, so let's dive in. First things first, let's talk about the 9-star monsters. So yeah, after a long awaited reveal, turns out the difficulty system is actually just an additional star level on monsters. So previously, of course, while 8-star tempered was the main thing we were going for, now it's 9 stars. Now what I wasn't expecting, and I think what a lot of other players weren't expecting, was that the difference between 8 and 9-star is actually much more subtle. In my first few hunts, I was genuinely struggling to understand what the difference between the two were. My hunt time was largely similar, the damage feels almost identical, and yet it didn't feel like the fight played too much differently. After playing a bit more and seeing what other community members seem to think and their researchers led them to believe, rather than numbers being drastically different, instead there's those more underlying subtleties that affect the hunt, such as wound resistance, monsters not toppling over as much when you break wounds, chaining certain attacks into each other much more quickly and spammy, so the player has to be much more reactive and alert during the fight. And it's also important to know the different monsters got different balancing respectively. Arcveld's a key example a lot of people are pointing to at the minute. If you fight the 9-star 5 purple star variant of it, and the hunt time is much more noticeable in that hunt. But yeah, all in all, while you might not be able to directly identify what the difference is, I think a lot of you guys have felt the same based on what I've heard from you. The fights feel in a good place. I think a lot of people were very scared when they heard about this update that it would be a case of scaling numbers way too high, and then we would have this artificial difficulty system. When I did my patch notes video, that seemed to be the biggest point raised in the comment section, but I suppose it's a non-issue in that sense. Now there is a big argument to be raised that it's almost a lazy solution to what is an existing problem in the game. We know what these fights are now, we understand how to play them, and so taking an existing fight and just making it 1 star more difficult doesn't scratch the itch that most of the endgame active players have been searching for. I was very much so under the impression we were going to get a new mechanic rather than a difficulty level in terms of the frenzy, as that is the biggest open-ended thing in Wilds. It's just waiting there, like waiting to be a mechanic in the game, but nothing's happened with it yet. And that would have been a very good way to, I feel like, address the difficulty system. The 8-star tempers could already 2-shot you, and the hunt time was feeling much more substantial for players. And so giving them some sort of affliction or modifier opposed to, tweaking numbers a little bit, I personally think would have been a much better solution. But who knows, maybe that is still coming. We'll have to wait and see on that. Another concern I've been seeing a lot is that the 9-star monster variant only applies to 9 monsters in the game. Those 9 being pretty much the main cast that we've been fighting on repeat since launch, with addition to the title update monsters as well. Now, while I will say it's very positive that every single one of these things now has the same level of relevance for the most part, the rate at which they drop the material you need for charms is very similar across the board for the most part, and so you're not going to be upset when all you're getting is Raidals, but you actually want Arcveld. That was one of the main points they were targeting with this patch. They even made that funny comment about the game being skewed around Arcveld. But the issue this leaves players with is that the 9 monsters that, got this upgrade, these are the cast members we've been fighting on loop anyway. And all this does is further create the gap between this main cast member and all of the side cast members. I'm talking about the classic Rathaloses, the Guardian monsters, so on and so forth, right? Like all of the other guys. There's no reason to go hunt them at all now, and with our power increasing and increasing, it becomes less fun to just go do them for the sake of it. Now, I pinned it in the comment on my previous video, but it is very, very key to note the only reason this update exclusively applies to the 9 monsters we have is a result of the update being pushed out earlier than expected. This update was supposed to come out in Title Update 3, but of course we've now had it multiple weeks earlier. The Monster Hunter team have confirmed that via event quests, more of the other monsters are going to be brought up to this level. So don't worry, all of the other things we want to hunt but are currently, pointless to go do so, they are going to be brought up to this level, and also the future additions via Title Updates are also going to be brought up to this level. Now the problem is with event quests and how they work in this game is that they of course go away. So if you're telling me Guardian Rathalos is going to be brought up to 9-star but only for a week, and then it rotates to something else, I don't think players are going to like that. At this point, just make event quests active permanently. That's how I feel about that anyway. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. My only other point with this, I will say, is that I think we as players should be able to search for the particular quest we're looking for at this point. There's so many different tiers and variety of difficulty systems in the game now, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to find the exact thing you want. The higher HR you have, the more likely it becomes that the higher difficulty 9-star monsters appear. However, not every player is going to want to do the higher difficulty quests every single time. Some people want to load in, hop in with a few friends, do some casual hunts and hop back off. But vice versa, some players are going to want to exclusively do the hard content, but in order to find quests, if you have to go to camp and rest just to find the monster you're looking for, it becomes a bit of a tedious, annoying process. Whether the game introduces a guiding land style type of luring feature in which you can target a monster to spawn, submit materials to do the ritual, and then the monster you're looking for becomes much more likely to spawn at a higher difficulty or lower, depending on whatever ritual you do to summon them. Likewise, this could be core functionality built into the quests themselves. Straight up, we could just be given a list of every monster in the game. You pick what you want. You can manually toggle if you want it to be tempered, if you want it to be 9-star, 8-star, 7-star, and then launch the quest with your custom settings. How they choose to execute this, I don't know, but I do genuinely believe this is something the game needs at this point. And if the system is continued to be improved upon with much more difficulty levels, and I can only assume the expansion is going to further build on that, resting just to RNG see what pops up out in the world isn't going to do it for a lot of players. And honestly, that's my main issue with the 9-star monsters at present. It's not really even to do with them, it's more so the whole game functionality. Now, of course, when you do beat a 9-star monster, you get materials that turn into a randomly generated talisman. These talismans can have both weapon and armor skills, along with decoration slots. Let's talk about those in a bit more detail, shall we? So, the RNG nature of these talismans naturally has upset a lot of people. It's always going to, right? When the amount of effort you put in doesn't necessarily correlate with the reward you get out, it can be a frustration for players. I personally don't mind the talisman system. I didn't mind it in Rise and Sunbreak either. However, those games did end up patching the system to address some of the RNG based issues they face. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, from my personal experience, the odds of getting a useful charm are pretty damn low. And so, when the only way you're able to farm and obtain these charms is through the most difficult content the game has to offer, that's going to dissuade many players from participating in the system. So, in Rise Break, they later introduced a system in which you could perform particular rituals which would alter the type of charms you received. Some rituals had a pool of different skills that your charm would pull from automatically. They then later added an update in which you could direct target a particular skill you were searching for, and so all of the charms you generated would have that skill on them, or at least it was a higher chance for them to have that skill. And while it still then revolved around RNG and created an endgame grinding loop, at least the player had a level of satisfaction knowing that every charm they got would be useful to some extent. But yeah, as it currently stands, you can go do a 22-minute hunt for, 2 9-stars, Arc Guard and Gore, just to get a charm that has like dragon attack and fire attack and poison resistance. Like no one's using that. But okay, let's look at this with the RNG in mind. The purpose of these charms, as stated by the developers, is to try and target the build diversity issue that we have in Wilds. So many skills and builds are completely obsolete in the game due to certain skills being absolute king. I think the weapon and armor skill system doesn't particularly work too well in the game, and of course the heavy Arcean focus also plays its part in that area. However, now the RNG charm system can have weapon skills and armor skills and decoration slots, the concept is it's going to encourage players to experiment with other pieces of their armor or weapons now that there's much more flexibility in what you can insert into one's build. A prime example of a talisman I got. It came with Blast, as well as another pretty useful skill, which then meant in conjunction with my Blast Longsword, I can now play that build, whereas previously I would have to sacrifice crit boost or an important sharpness skill to make that work, which would result in me losing out in damage, and overall it just wouldn't compete in terms of damage. But now I can use my Blast Longsword if I want, and it doesn't take away from my core build. This system naturally complements you using non-arting weapons as well. With the lack of slots they have, a lot of players are dissuaded from using them. But now, you don't need to really worry about what skills come built onto the weapon and how many decoration slots they have, because you know you can get the replacements you need on your talisman. So in theory, it works really well, but in practice, does it achieve this? Kind of, but maybe not enough. So I must have legitimately got through around 100 charms plus before I found something that I was happy to start using and replace my weakness exploit charm. And funnily enough, the charm I replaced this with also had weakness exploit on it, because as I mentioned, certain skills in this game just dominate others. And while the RNG Talismans gives you a bit more leniency and room to kind of experiment and put other stuff in, overall, players are going to be searching for the same exact skills, so that via decorations on their armour, they can then plug in others. This way players are going to go from using weakness exploit 3 to 4, from agitator 2 to 3, or from burst 1 to 2, you know what I mean. And maybe that's just a me thing, that's just how I've personally applied the update to my build. However, knowing the mentality of Monster Hunter players and wanting to squeeze out the most optimal, mathematically best build, I personally see a lot of people using this system in the same way I have. Lock in your fundamentally better skills and call it a day. I hope I'm wrong with that, and I hope as the system continues to be developed, this further incentivizes build diversity. And again, I'm not blind to it, I do see that it does definitely help the issue, it's just I don't think it solves it. And I suppose that concludes my overall thoughts on this patch. It's a positive step forward, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a small fix rather than a complete solution. We'll have to see what happens in Title Update 3, as we do know it's going to further improve upon what we got here in this patch. Again, let me know what you think about the update down in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you very soon. Thanks for watching.